This does appear to be the year of the comeback kings, doesn't it? Winter Sun finally released Time 2, Ancients broke their slumber with Beyond the Reach of the Sun, and despite the death of Black Midi, Geordie Greep's The New Sound carried on the torch. And now, finally, after much speculation, Sweden's progressive rock kings Beardfish are entering the ring once again with their extremely exciting new album, Songs for Beating Hearts. Guys, gals and non-binary pals, my name is Ian, this is Rhyme Signatures, and we're once again opening the lid on the best new releases in prog rock and metal. Right, so me and Beardfish go back a bit of a long way, all the way back to the bygone era of 2008, with what is often considered to be their undisputed masterpiece of an album, Sleeping in Traffic Part 2. I was introduced to this album by a friend, who insisted that I need to listen to the nearly 36-minute long track of Sleeping in Traffic. Their advice and guidance was well-founded, as it sent me on a deep dive spiral of the band's whole discography up until that point, as well as marking Beardfish as one of those bands to remain on my must-stay-up-to-date-with list. It was an awakening experience, certainly, and I quickly became a lifetime fan. So of course I was heartbroken when after the release of their 2015 album of Plus 4626 Comfort Zone, the band packed up their bags and appeared to call it quits. I did take some small consolation, however, when Rickard Sorblom joined English prog rockers Big Big Train the year prior to Comfort Zone's release as a full-time member. But it did also carry the wounding agony that this likely meant this could be the end of Beardfish for good. Now, obviously the fact that I am here reviewing a Beardfish album in 2024 should be a reasonably solid indication that the band reformed. But let me tell you now, it's been a pretty lonely near 10 years being under the reasonable impression that we were never going to get new music from the guys. Many a night I found myself, much like 90s cartoon Wolverine, staring wistfully at my copy of Sleeping in Traffic Part 2, longing for a comeback. And so here we are at last. My prayers have been well and truly answered, and I was bequeathed a pre-release copy of the album by the lovely folks at Inside Out. But the real question still remains. Is this a triumphant explosion of a comeback, or should Beardfish have been shaved and filleted? Okay, so right off the bat, let's be real here. I went into this album wanting a Beardfish album. You know, there's a certain expectation that I was having after having been a fan for around 15 years or so, and I was keeping my fingers crossed that this expectation would be met. And chat, let me tell you right now, we are so effing back. To say that the band haven't missed a single beat since Comfort Zone would definitely be putting it one way. But to also call this a fluidic progression of their natural, well-fitting sound could be another. This record is unmistakably Beardfish. The homages to the old-school prog rock of yesteryear, infused with their own uniquely Nordic personalities, is on full force and display. The interplay between the keyboards and the bass is especially well laid out throughout the entire album. But of course, no more so than on the album's centerpiece, the 20-minute-long epic of Out in the Open. Now, while I don't think this is going to be challenging the genre-defining masterpiece that is Sleeping in Traffic, this track definitely feels like it's head and shoulders above some of the band's similarly tracking longer songs, such as Until You Comply including Entropy, and The Stone Said If I Could Speak, and Ode to the Rock and Roller. But with the benefit of an extra 5 minutes on top of those songs, the band finds plenty of additional space to let the full scope of their ideas breathe and develop. The album is reasonably brief by the band's standards, a tidy 52 minutes, or 58 if you include the 80s-inspired bonus track, when the majority of their works push closer to or in excess of 75 minutes or so. In a lot of ways, though, this trimmed-down approach actually kinda works in the band's favour. There's a lot less flapping around, a lot less padding and musical interludes that seem to be in place purely for extending the length of the record for the sake of the prog. And it allows the band to get right on with things and get to the point much quicker. The opening track of Echo Tone sets the mood for the album nicely, a gentle acoustic lead before Rickard's distinctive, warming vocals fill the air. and it's like being right back where we left off. It's a pleasant, thought-provoking little number with some great little vocal runs and a nice little hook that gets revisited later on in the album, just before the final track of Torrential Downpour. But let's be real with ourselves, we're all here for Out in the Open. As I mentioned earlier, this isn't quite the skyscraper of Sleeping in Traffic, but there's still enough ideas here to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Now, the promo has this split into 5 distinct parts, and while the divide feels natural and fitting with the way it's been split apart, it does ever so slightly trick your brain into not seeing this as a 20-minute epic, which is a tiny blemish on an otherwise near faultless track. The opening dance of bass and piano is immediately engaging feeling, attention-grabbing, and a great display of the band's continuing technical proficiencies. As a bass player myself, it's honestly really nice to hear the low end take such a prominent place within not only the songwriting but the mixing as well. Now, we're definitely in classic prog rock territory here, with keyboards aplenty, jazzy little fills and expressive little flourishes cropping up with alarming regularity. It's honestly hard to think of a better classic-style prog rock epic that's coming out this year. And should I decide to do a Best Epics video in my year-end season, then it's not hard to see this as a contender for the top spot. But of course there's more to this record than just Out in the Open, even if that track is doing the majority of the heavy lifting. The tracks Beating Hearts and Torrential Downpour fill out the longer songs quota, ranging between 8 and 11 minutes apiece, and manage to tell sufficiently different enough stories and vibes to stand aside from the leading centrepiece. The final 2 minutes of the latter are among my favourite instrumental moments that the band has ever done, closing off the record in an appropriately climactic and gobsmacking fashion. Ultimately, it is just a delight to hear the band back together, and back in such a slick fashion. The production and mixing is impeccable, Rickard's vocals are distinctive and inviting as ever, David Zacherson shreds and paints beautiful tapestries with his guitar lines, Magnus Östgren shows restraint and passion on the drums, but Robert Hansen and his bass work is what elevated this album for me. His performances here should be putting him on the world stage as one of modern prog rock's absolute superstars. He's phenomenal, and frequently left my jaw dropped with his dazzling technical skills and understanding of how to make use of otherwise empty spaces. Oh yeah, it's the fun section where I try and pick apart the parts of the record that didn't work that well for me. And luckily, I've not got too much to report on here from that front. Now, the biggest thing for me on this record is that, unlike a lot of previous Beardfish albums, there's not a great deal of immediacy or catchiness to the songs here. Certainly not on the first half dozen listens or so. The prog is turned up high here with an emphasis on non-standard song structuring, a nose turned up to engage in choruses, you get the idea. Don't go into this album expecting that many parts of it will stick with you until quite a few full listens into it. I also kind of miss the cheekiness, the sense of humour and what have you that carried albums like Sleeping in Traffic Part 2. And while I appreciate the themes and attitudes of this new album, and that the band aren't repeating themselves, it still would have been kind of nice to have a little bit more of that irreverence and slapstick to break up the super serious progressive rock from time to time. I'm also a little bit on the fence around the structure and pacing of the album. We lead in with a short-form track, fire out the epic, and then go mid-length, short-length, mid-length, and then it's kind of done. Now, I don't know if this is more of a me problem though, but by the time the album finishes, in spite of its fairly robust length, I'm kind of left wanting a little bit more. It might just be a case of the album being extremely front-loaded, spaffing the epic almost as soon as it can, leaving the rest of the album to entertain us in its wake, which I honestly don't think works as well as it could have done otherwise if they'd left Out in the Open more positioned towards the back of the album, rather than the start of it. Honestly though, my complaints here really are quite minimal, as the music that we have here is genuinely some of the best that the band has ever put out, easily marking this as a top 3 album for the band, and despite its lack of immediate hooks or instant gratification, this is still a great jumping in point for anyone new to the band. So, what else can I possibly say about Beardfish's Songs for Beating Hearts? Man, in a year that's been full of hyped releases and honestly a few disappointments, it's been really refreshing for one of the big releases to have hit the proverbial nail on the head almost perfectly. As a long-time fan of the band, I got a little flutter in my heart when this promo dropped into my inbox, and that flutter turned into a soar when the record turned out to be more than worth the near decade-long wait. I mean, no, it's not perfect. I've touched on my minor gripes with the record, but the reality is that Songs for Beating Hearts is like coming home from a long day at work to find that your best buddy from school who you haven't seen for nearly 20 years is in the neighbourhood and wants to meet up for a few drinks. It's a little jarring at first. He's lost some hair, he's gained some weight, he's got married and had kids, but after 20 minutes in their company you realise that it's the exact same person that you loved all of those years ago. They've just got some new stories to tell you. It all adds up to an album that's incredibly easy to recommend grabbing a physical copy of, which is in no small part helped by the absolutely gorgeous artwork. I won't lie, I did pre-order this one the second the album was announced, and I'm honestly quite relieved to find that my instincts to do so were on point. If you're a fan of old school prog rock and you're new to Beardfish, then consider this the prologue to one of the most consistent and brilliant discographies in modern music. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, so once the album comes out on November 1st and you've given it a few spins, please tell me about your experiences with it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought about it, please talk to me about your experience with the album in the comments down below. Please do drop me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Please also do consider subscribing to the channel if you like what I've been doing so far. And until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.